that we have Ezgi Ozyonum from University of Concordia.
Hi everyone, my name is Ezgi. Tanja couldn't make it. Actually, she's going to another conference, that's why she's not there, but I will present on behalf of us. This research is very important for ourselves because we both engage in bringing decolonial lens in our work, and it has been challenging. And I'm a PhD candidate at Concordia University, and my reflection on my own international student experience actually didn't start when I was an international student in France. Then I'm from Turkey. I first went to France, and then I went to Canada for my PhD, and I start reading about decolonial scholars. And when I read about decolonial scholars and the way how they talk about coloniality, decoloniality, it really touched to my own heart. So I really want to bring those lens, but it has been challenging. So that's why today we would like to share a little bit of what do we mean by decolonial theoretical frameworks, what are some possibilities and challenges. So that's the overall today's presentation. And hi everyone for the online ones. I like to walk sometimes, so if I disappear, I'm so sorry. But I will do some positionality, context and problem, research with decolonizing theoretical frameworks, and the conclusion. Also, because we are from Concordia University and we locate in Canada, there is Canadian universities are really having this emphasis on decolonizing education. Of course, it has been criticized that in what level, to what extent, but at the same time, we do believe as a researchers that we should also mention where the research took place. Even though today we gather at the Manchester, but I like to mention that this research took place in Jahjage, Montreal, and Ghanaian nations that we could also remember in our study. As I said, so this comes from actually motivations that Tanja is my co-supervisor, and she was leading Decolonizing Light project at Concordia, which was a big funded project. So our paths crossed by, and while we are bringing decolonial lens to our work, actually we like to a little bit have some reflection that we like to share with you. And also, I like to share this quotation, and Riyad, you had the same quotation from yesterday. So what I find is also my presentation will contribute to what has been actually said, and some part that continuation. And yesterday when I joined the decolonizing session, I feel like it's a kind of like we all having one big conversation with a different perspective together. That research is probably one of the dirtiest words in the indigenous words vocabulary. I do believe the research can bring progress if it's can done ethically, sustainably, with really go into deeper roots of coloniality that we could deconstruct, but otherwise it can do harm. I also will do fast forward, but the idea is international students, numbers increasing, publications are increasing, but at the same time, there's unbalance, uneven distribution. So it little bit leads for the literature to take a critical turn. Some people call it a critical turn. It could be a decolonial turn, that really the questions has been asked, who benefits, who suffers. I think decolonial theoretical frameworks comes in those parts that when we ask those questions, that can be helpful to answer. So I will highlight two problematic framings that has been used for international students in today's presentation. So one of them is related to assimilation, that it really takes the international students with the adjustment and it says that the highest proportion of the research when they do a conduct of the review, they find it really that the research takes place as international students need to accommodate, change, and adopt. But this really, this empowers and minimizes the complexity of international student agency and really lead to acceptance, the superiority of the host. But the other part is the vulnerability framework, which I find it is the opposite end that can be called academic hospitality. In this lens, you put all the responsibility on the shoulders of educators, faculty to help international students. But that we find that is also problematic because international students has also so much contribution, and sometimes it leads this vulnerable group leads that we don't really see their contributions and what they are actually doing, and feed stereotypes and maybe contribute to stigmatization of the students. And overall, if we think and if we want to frame a research with they are epistemic equal, I think we need to get rid of these problematic frameworks. And these problematic frameworks also produce all these different labels that we see in international students, in practices, in media, in research, we could see in policy, but all these things produce some different labels. So a few of the labels that I highlight today's presentation is that they become passive beings. They become homogeneous group. They become deficits, deficit beings. They are inferior. They are vulnerable. They are othered. Even they are become a tokens of diversity. There are so many research that shows that how the universities use international students as the tokens of diversity. And in some countries, for example, I study Canada, cash calls are the other label that we hear a lot for international students. Some studies talk about them as the top talents because they become the ideal immigrants in some countries because between the education and immigration lines can be blurred. And lastly, more and more we see that in political exchanges that international students' names also coming, but they become as subjects without agency who can be used for political and economic gains. So all these frameworks, I do believe, contribute also these labels that we hear for international students. And it leads for really that there should be alternative framing. And some of the authors mention in here that how there's like less research or international students become the objects, but not the subjects, and we should really acknowledge them as a pivotal actors. So in that way, what we try to name with the decolonizing theoretical framework is that we need frameworks that can seek to empower marginalized voices and knowledges and challenge dominant ways of knowing and being. And usually, and most of the case, these decolonizing frameworks have a certain understanding of modernity and coloniality. And they talk about them as the two sides of the same coin, that how the modernity contribute to the coloniality. And it talks in those decolonizing frameworks that how decolonizing can start with the decolonizing mind, and really it can impact on the research with decolonizing methodologies. And we can adopt some, like how we could do it is we can adopt some norms, some concepts, we can really try to understand through the experiences. So I can give some examples, but I also point out some of the decolonial norms or some concepts can be helpful for us to understand. I will highlight few of them, and few of them are also research with international student website has also part with the theoretical frameworks with the decoloniality that there's a part. I think few of them mentioned but actually there are more to it, and it's so hard to map all of them. But few of them I can highlight in here is the concept of piano's coloniality of being, knowledge, and power, which is actually one of the most used. And in this conference, we also see those concepts has been used for the international students and their experiences. The other concept that I want to mention is Grossfogel's westernized universities. And Grossfogel mentioned that the westernized universities doesn't locate only in the West, that how the university system really influenced many countries outside of the world. And I could really say that from the lived experience as well, that it's really happening in different parts of the world. And also Santos has this concept of episode lines and episode thinking that I find helpful. It's so hard to mention every detail, but in a way that the Santos talks about how one like dominant way of knowing leads the other knowledges to be in this episode, that it's so hard, that is almost like so hard to really see, but we should have this concept of ecologies of knowledges, that all different knowledges can flourish. So, but while I'm sharing these concepts, let's say we are so get excited and we want to apply these concepts, but of course, I think we should be really being critical about local and global dynamics, because when we look at student mobilities or international student experiences, I think coloniality plays a role in the global. But right now I'm studying international students in Canada, and I do believe the local with the indigenous knowledge and indigenous way of knowing is also impact, because it's very nuanced. In one way, I do believe international students impacted by this coloniality and almost forced to move because of this coloniality. But at the same time, if they don't respect the indigenous people and if they have no knowledge, they become almost colonizer. Like, I don't know whether how maybe my wordings are very strong, but it's a kind of, I try to say that there is this dual in between spaces. So what I overall try to say is there is this possibility of what we try to aim with this research with international students, to really humanization, to really provide agency, and to really overcome some of the problems that I think decolonial frameworks offered almost decolonial concepts for it. For example, if you talk about homogeneous group is a problematic, then maybe we can adopt ecologies of knowledges to really try to understand how to bring their knowledges forward. And one other way to also look, I'm sorry, my slides are so, there are so many things that I want to mention, but the time is so limited. But I still wanted to keep it there. That when I started with the decolonial lens on my work, I see that it's not only in theoretical framework, it's changed the way how I think myself as a researcher. It's really impacted the way how I'm doing my literature review. So it has all these impact in every part of the research, which is, I find that it transforms. So there are some cases that, to give an example, and the author is here actually, that, for example, coloniality of power and the border thinking is adopted, that it's a beautiful example. And there's another example in here that they bring participatory research and really challenge the dynamics between the research and researcher. How to decolonize the literature review. This is also another example that how they really change the way how we understand the literature review and their goals. So these are a few examples, but so many different things that I think can be limited for a person who wants to adopt. And there are also so many limitations. I find the institutional government limited time, because this is not a short thing to do. So I feel it has been challenging, but I'm so happy to learn. And the last thing that I want to share for today's presentation is that I do believe decolonization work, and to really learn, it's a kind of shared responsibility that we should be engaging and having this conversation. Sorry for doing a bit faster, but if you have any questions, anything, I like to have more exploration in that time. Thank you.